Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Digital Service Squad webinar. Today, we are talking about Google Ads and Meta Ads Manager, two juggernauts of digital advertising. And yeah, hopefully we're not going to get too technical, but cover off a lot of theory and best practices when it comes to advertising on either of these. And before I get into that, of course, I want to mention this is brought to you by the Digital Service, or the Digital Service Squad is brought to you by the Digital Main Street program, which is brought to you by OBIA, the Ontario government, and the Toronto Association of BIAs. And here, specifically in South Georgian Bay and Grey counties, we are managed by the South Georgian Bay Small Business Enterprise Center and the Business Enterprise Center of Grey County. That's who has applied for the funding and that puts us in place and that manages the program. And we're super excited to be here and provide free digital marketing service to local businesses and webinars just like this, and as well as hands-on service and support, like I said. And we're going to put the link, of course, to book service with our team in the chat. There it goes. Oh, and this is a common Zoom mistake. You send it to just hosts and panelists. So make sure you just hit to send to everyone. There you go. So like I said, we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to jump right into it and start with an overview of what we're talking about today with regards to both of these two platforms. So I'm going to talk about an overview of the platforms, what they offer, and why we want to use them. I want to share with you a marketing plan template. So this is something that I found extremely useful and helpful before even getting started in those platforms, to work with a marketing plan template to put all of our ideas down on paper first. And I'll explain why that's really important and helpful. Then we're going to kind of get started with these platforms, just explaining the hierarchy, how they are organized. I found that to be one of the biggest sort of things to wrap my head around when learning these platforms, is how they're organized. And just understanding that will kind of give you a lot to get started with. And then we're going to talk about important installations. So things to add on to connect to your different platforms. That's where we do get a little bit technical, but I'm going to kind of glaze over it a little bit. We are going to talk budgeting. So this is going to be really important part of any advertising campaign, is how much do you spend? It's a very common question that we get to. And so we're going to hopefully arm you with some tools and some strategies to be able to understand what is an effective budget. How can you budget for your own particular product or service for a successful campaign? And then finally, we're going to look at some best practices, just things that apply to both of these platforms. Again, keeping it pretty theoretical and not getting into too much nitty-gritty of how to actually find things in there and use them. Again, that is something you can book with the Digital Service Squad. We can work with you directly to get into those platforms. And I should mention too, as we go along, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop those into the Q&A. There is a Q&A section active here, and I will try and answer those as we go. So the first thing we want to talk about is, because we get this question all the time as well, is it worth it? Is digital advertising worth putting your money into? And the answer is definitely yes, but as long as it's done effectively. I mean, that should go without saying, but that's sort of a, what does that mean, effectively? And we're going to talk about that and how you can advertise more effectively on both of these platforms. I will say that the easiest way to actually waste your money on digital advertising, especially on Facebook, is to hit the Boost Now button. You see it whenever you create a post. There's that suggestion they want you to boost it now. And by making it extremely easy for you with that tool, you're losing out a lot of the options, the functionality of like sort of the bigger Meta Ads Manager in that case, that will allow you to create more effective ads. So as an example of that too, when you hit that Boost Now button, at least when you're in Canada, the default audience size is set to all of Canada. And so for most small businesses, local businesses, that is far too large of an audience, especially if you're boosting something for $20, $50. If you're boosting it to all of Canada, that's going to be gone in a flash. And I guarantee you won't really see any results from that. And Google has the same equivalent. They have this sort of quick setup. You'll see it a lot when you're working in your Google business profile. There's a lot of incentive there to sign up for or to start advertising, and they run you through this really quick setup, and there's not much to it. And again, it's, in my opinion, it's a bit of a cash grab. So it's something to avoid, I suggest, when getting into digital advertising. So our goal today is to really encourage you to explore the more advanced features within each of these two platforms. And we're going to give you some tools and some tips that will help you create more effective advertising campaigns. And we do have a first question, which is, will we receive a copy of this recording? Yes, I will send out a recording, a link to the YouTube version that we'll put up. And when I send that email, I'll include this document. There are a lot of active links in it, you'll see, and those are going to be really helpful too as you start exploring these platforms. So let's give an overview real quick of these two major players in digital advertising. Google Ads and Meta Ads Manager are both very similar. They are two powerful advertising platforms that allow businesses to reach their target audiences across multiple platforms. So not just within their own entities, like so Facebook, obviously, or Meta Ads Manager has Facebook and Instagram, but they also have Meta Ads Manager. You can advertise in like WhatsApp, and they have a whole other network outside of those platforms that they can post ads for you as well. Same with Google. They have YouTube, Gmail, all these different places. Obviously, search is a big big area for advertising, but then they have their Google Ad Network. If you've ever seen when you create an ad, especially like a display ad in Google, and then you see it on like a news website, that's because they are an ad partner. They're able to show those Google ads, so you get a much more broad audience and reach with those. So they're both huge in that sense, in the reach, getting out to new audience members. Both Google and Meta offer a variety of formats, including, like I said, search, display. You've got video, shopping ads. Now that Meta has their Facebook and Instagram shop, you can create shopping ads, and they offer lead generation ads, which are kind of cool. They both will have a form right in that ad where you can, the user can put in their information without having to actually go to your website. So these are great for lead generation campaigns. both offer advanced targeting options, which allow advertisers to reach users based on geographical location, demographics, interests, and even search intent. That's one of the main benefits, of course, to digital advertising. I think why these two platforms, these two companies are so big is because they have this information about us. Sometimes we complain about how much they know about us, but as a marketer, it's kind of amazing and it's useful in a lot of ways. So it's a blessing and a curse, maybe, but you'll see, it can be really effective. We can also retarget visitors who've been on your website. So this is really a fantastic way to stay top of mind with people. When we know they've been on your website, we can get back in front of them. Again, usually using those more broad networks that both Google and Meta offer, where they'll be browsing around the web and your ad is still showing in front of them because they've been on your website. That's how that's done. And they both offer some robust measurement analytics and reporting tools that allow advertisers to measure the effectiveness of their campaigns and optimize their strategy accordingly. So these are just some of the reasons why these two platforms are pretty great for running your advertising campaigns. They cover a lot of bases and can give you some really fantastic tools to put your products, your services, your branding in front of the right people. So just a real quick rundown on where do you even find your Meta Ads Manager. If you've always just been boosting posts, this might be a bit of a new territory for you to find this. And certainly Meta Ads Manager is buried much deeper than Google Ads. And it's just because of the setup there with your business suite account. So essentially you will go to your business.facebook.com, that's Meta Business Suite. And from there at the bottom of the left-hand menu, there's a button that says All Tools, and it's going to open up a bigger menu and you'll select Ads Manager. Now, if you haven't set up an ad account yet, you'll just be prompted to do that. And it just requires you to name the account and put in a payment info. You can skip that for the time being until you get it set up and running, but you won't be able to run any ads until you've put in that payment info. There's a whole other bunch of setup that may be involved too, because of, again, the business suite is a bit of a maze. So if you have any trouble with that, it's a great excuse to reach out to the Digital Service Squad. We can help navigate that whole area of Facebook, because it can be pretty tricky. But essentially, that's where you'll go to find your Meta Ads Manager account. When it comes to Google, like I said, it's much more simple, straightforward. Just head on over to ads.google.com, and you're going to want to log in with your main Google account. So again, if you haven't already set up an ad account yet, you'll need to go through their setup process. And something to look out for is that by default, their main setup is going to start you with like I was saying, that sort of simple, low functionality kind of campaign or setup. And right at the beginning of that process, there's a button to just kind of go to the more advanced ad account. And that's what you want to do so that you gain access to all of those features. And here's a pro tip, use the same Google account for all of your products. So I've seen this a lot, business owners will have multiple Google accounts for different things. And then it gets really confusing when your Google account or your analytics, your search console, your business profile, all these things. If they're all under different accounts, it can get really complicated. So to keep it really simple and easy, try to use the same login Google account for all of those products, especially because we're going to talk about connecting your Google Ad account and your analytics account in a couple minutes. So before you even get started, I would say this is a little bit of a wax on, wax off situation, I would say, where we developed this marketing plan template that I think is really, really helpful. And the reason that I developed it with the team was that, I would find that when I would sit down in front of Google Ads or Meta Ads Manager, didn't matter which one, there was a serious amount of stress that was caused by just like trying to get the ad created in that moment, right? Because we're sitting down and it's asking us for questions like, what is the content of the ad? Like, what product are you selling? Who are you selling it to? And what I found was sitting down in that moment and trying to figure all of this out was not productive. It was like I said, causing me a lot of stress, and I was ending up rushing a lot of these things. So by working with this template, it forces you to sit down and think about all of these things in advance, which then when it comes to sitting down at your Meta Ads Manager or Google Ads account to actually create the ad, there's almost no stress. Like, it's just copy paste. You're taking the information from the plan and executing it. And that's it, because you've already put in the thought, you know what you want to do. And that's why I just really can't stress this enough. It helps immensely. So like I said, it helps you to plan, what product are you going to sell? It's funny that a lot of people don't even really think about that, right? It's like you own a shoe store and you want to create an ad. Well, is it for just shoes, or is it for like men's shoes, women's shoes, kids' shoes? Maybe there's a new product launch and you just want to focus on like one product. Or maybe it's running shoes, for spring. Sitting down to think about that in advance is going to make your campaigns way more effective. Again, we look at your audience and then your messaging. So what are some of your headlines and body copy? What's your timeline? How long do you want to run this? Using that shoe example again, it's like, if running season is kicking off soon, like, you want to set that start and end date so that you are ready to go. And having that timeline is also going to help you figure out your budget and what you want to spend. We're going to talk more about budgeting. That's a pretty big question as well that people ask us, and that a lot of thought needs to kind of go into that. And we'll dive into that in more detail in a couple of slides. Okay, so we've planned our ad campaign with that help of that template, and we're sort of ready to go and start looking into Google Ads or Facebook Ads Manager. And one thing that, again, I'm just sort of using my own experience of learning these two platforms. I think it was, I think it's helpful to really understand how this hierarchy works of, you've got campaign level and then ad groups or sets. So Google calls them ad groups and Facebook calls them ad sets. But it's the same thing. And then you've got ads underneath. And what's important to understand about this is that at each level, there are different settings that apply to everything underneath. So generally speaking, at the campaign level is where you would set your budget so that everything else underneath will follow that same budget. And that, in a way, is really easy for you to manage a budget overall, right? So, because if every ad, you're spending $5 a month or something, that would get really confusing and really hard to manage, especially if you're turning them on or off, and then it can get really complicated. So that's one of the good things. If we think about what are the settings at each of these levels, and how do we control the overall campaign, so it's just easier to manage. And so budget at the campaign level is a great way to start planning or wrapping your head around that. And then when it comes to ad groups and sets, usually that's where we set up our targeting. So if we think about it, right, we can do one campaign for spring shoes, and we've got a budget of $100. Spring running shoes. I know I'm sticking with this example. I'm not even a runner, but let's just say we're going to run this campaign. So now we've got, we can do a bunch of different ad groups that might be targeted to different demographics. So we can have one for men's shoes. We can have one for women's shoes. We can even, and then in each of those, we can also target runners specifically, or people who are in market for running shoes. And then at the bottom level, we've got our ads. So that's where we can then, put in the imagery that we want, the headlines that we want. And I'm going to talk about it later too, like in terms of best practices, but I definitely recommend creating more ads, creating a bunch of ads for each ad group that you create. And the reason for that is that, if we look back again, we've set the budget at the top, right? For, let's say it's $100 for that campaign. Having more ads is not going to increase your budget. It's not going to cost you any more money. What it's doing is that it's going to give the platform, both Facebook and Google, whichever you're using, the more ads you have in there, it arms that campaign with just enough or more resources to get in front of people and get the right message in front of people, right? So when you have 10 ads in an ad group, the platform is going to figure out pretty quickly which ones of those are performing best, right? It's going to test them all out and say, well, this one's getting the most response. And then it's just going to focus on whichever of those ads are your top performers. And then that's a really, really easy way to start optimizing your campaign by saying, okay, this one is a top performer. It's getting more clicks, it's getting more sales. So I can maybe turn off some of these other ones that are not performing. And then I can, copy that one that is performing and make some changes to it. See if I can improve it, make it better. Typically, this is called A/B testing, when we say here are two ads that are similar or the same, but with a slight variation. And it's just a really great way of taking what is already working, trying to make it better. And I think that is just a really great visual, in my opinion, of how the hierarchy works sort of in both cases. Let's talk about installation. So this is where, again, we get a little bit technical. But these are some really important things that are worth mentioning as you get into launching your ad campaigns. So one of the first things I recommend is connecting your analytics account to your Google ad account. This is done through your Google Analytics account, and it's a really simple process. Again, as long as you have, you're logging in with the right Google account. When you mix those up, it gets complicated, but it is and should be a really simple process. But what that's going to do is when you look at your analytics account, now you can see data from your Google ad account, meaning, what campaign is performing and even what keywords are performing. And because see where Google Ads data ends from, they clicked and they went to your website, and then hopefully you've set up conversion tracking where you'll see, okay, the ad generated a sale. Where that ends, Google Analytics can kind of pick up and say, this is how much time they spent on your website. This is how many pages they viewed. Gives you more insight into, once they clicked on your ad, what do they do at your website? Maybe they made a sale, but what was that process like? How long were they there? Did they shop around for a long time? Are there any areas where they may have been, spending too much time? Maybe they're getting confused. So it's just a huge amount of valuable information that we can pull from this simple, very easy connection. And then I mentioned conversion tracking. So this is a vital part of any kind of digital marketing campaign, is understanding. You can't understand how it's working unless you have your conversion tracking set up. Quite simply, you can get a sense of how many clicks you're getting, but clicks don't mean anything in terms of how much money you're making, right? Clicks don't mean a sale. You can get all the clicks in the world, but if no one's buying, that's a problem. And what we want to do is, or need to do, is understand, is this ad generating any revenue? And so that really kind of ties back to my very first slide is, yes, digital marketing is effective, but we have to know if it's effective. And conversion tracking, so basically, there's a couple different ways to do it. There's Google Ads, Google Tag Manager is a tool where you will connect your ad conversion tracking into your website, and then tell it, this constitutes a sale. Or if you have a form that you want people to fill out, then you have to connect that process to it. One of the easiest ways to set up conversion tracking, if we think about this process, the easiest way to set up conversion tracking is by sending people to a landing page once they've completed the process, right? So when either whether or not they're filling out a form, purchasing a product, if we send them to a thank you page, a very explicit, like the page is labeled success checkout, then, and of course, the only way to get to that page is by completing that process that we want them to complete. Then it's really easy to say, okay, anyone who hits that page, if they land on that page, we know they've completed a transaction or filled out our form or whatever. And we can more easily set up, tell both Google Ads and Analytics that this constitutes a conversion, So start tracking those. There's other ways to do it. If you just have like an e-commerce store or whatever, but certainly, yeah, sending them to a unique landing page is one of the easiest ways to do that. Again, I'm not going to get into the technical side of it necessarily, but I'll follow it up with some help in a sec. Similarly, there's the Facebook pixel. So the pixel is the same as a tag. So Google calls them tags or cookies. Facebook calls them pixels. It's essentially just that bit of code that we need to put on your website so that the ad platform can understand what the user is doing on your website, so they can report back on it, right? They know when a conversion has been completed, or when a conversion has been completed, and then they can report back to you on that. So both of those two things are like Google Ads. We can use conversion tracking setup, usually with the tag manager, and then Facebook Pixel is a similarly technical install. And Karen is asking, what if you have a service instead of a product? Well, yeah, so that's where I was saying, like, typically what you want to do, like if you're looking for leads, you want to have that sort of lead generation system set up, whether that's a form or even phone calls. So you can, especially Google Ads, it's really easy to create an ad with a phone number in it and use that as a conversion. And when you actually put the phone number in the search ad, you don't actually have to put any code on your website to track conversions, which is kind of nice. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself there. But again, sending people to a landing page once they've, maybe filled out your form, that will be what you want to track as a conversion, so that you can, again, determine whether or not your ads are performing in a way that you want them to. One other thing is to verify your domain in Meta Business Suite. A lot of people don't do this. They don't even know where it is. And, but I mean, I've dealt with a lot of shutdown. So Meta is notorious for just shutting off your ad account, disabling it for really no reason, and they're really bad at telling you why they're shutting it down. They just don't tell you. So usually the process to get it reinstated is really simple. You'll just click a button to have it reviewed. Someone will review it and they'll say, oh, it was shut down in error. 99% of the time, that's how we've seen that go. But what I've seen, though, is that when you verify your domain with Meta Business Suite, it will prevent that from happening in future cases. So it's not a must do. It's just something that I have found helpful in just preventing those shutdowns for a lot of brands. So yeah, Gerard has a question. I'm going to come back to that if you don't mind, Gerard, in one sec. So yeah, all that technical stuff, if that was a lot, it is. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is pretty technical, but it's something that we can help with. We have helped with a lot of clients set up those different products and really get them optimized with those different connections and add-ons and conversion tracking. So book a consult with your digital service squad. It is free, and yeah, why wouldn't you? Like, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Ben, can you put it in the chat? Sorry to interrupt. I'm not able to access everybody, so they can get the consult calendar, like so they can book a consult with us.
Oh,
please.
Absolutely. Right. There you go. There's that link in the chat for booking a consult with the Digital Service Squad. So why don't I, before I answer the next question, I will, let me tackle Gerard's question here, which is, what are the differences between Meta and Google Ads by comparison? And I guess perhaps I skipped over that a little bit. But if you're interested, so if you're interested in advertising and you're not sure which one of these platforms is the right one for you, let's kind of break it down. Like, so for Google, I'd say one of the biggest reasons to go with Google over Meta is the search, right? So if you have a product or a service that people are actively searching for, that people are searching for it. This can be, just household products, just everyday services that people need, accountants, financial services, medical is a big one, right? People searching for a dentist. Using Google search can be a really fantastic way to get in front of those people, to capture that audience of people who are actively looking for the products or services that you are trying to sell. Again, Google has YouTube, which is a whole other audience, right? So you can test out these different areas within the platforms to see if your audience is in that area, right? Again, conversion tracking is going to be your best friend when it comes to determining whether or not this is working or not. So if you run a search campaign, and you've got a cost per conversion, that means for every let's say every $5 you spend in advertising, you're making a sale. Then if you run a YouTube ad, for example, is it performing in the same way, or is it at a $10 cost per conversion, or a $50 cost per conversion? In which case, you want to maybe scale that back or figure out ways to improve that particular campaign. But essentially, reaching out to those different areas, you're hitting different audience members, and you're just sort of taking advantage of other opportunities within these two platforms. Meta, for example, as a contrast, we can think about, okay, this is a social platform, right? So we're certainly hitting a different audience. We're not necessarily looking for people who are actively searching for this thing or trying to get in front of those people, but we can use social media for a couple of things. I mean, branding is a really good example, right? So just keeping your brand top of mind with people by giving it some repetition, showing your ad in front of people regularly, so that when they think about hiring a real estate agent, they're like, oh, I this person's name, is very familiar because I see them all the time on social media. That's a common strategy. You can, again, use it for shopping ads, putting products in front of people when they may or may not be looking for it at this time, but it's going to give that recognition and hopefully inspire them to purchase, of course. But yeah, so there's kind of, different reasons and strategies behind each platform. Hopefully that sort of answers that question a little bit. There's a lot of differences and nuances to it, so I don't necessarily want to take up too much time going down that rabbit hole, but hopefully that kind of gives an overview why you might go in one direction or the other. A lot of people do both, right? To make sure you're covering your search and then getting some branding coverage and awareness through social media is also effective. Okay, so let's talk about budgeting. How do we know what we want to spend on our advertising campaign? This is, again, a very common question, and it can be very difficult to answer, but also kind of easy, right? So I've set up these two examples here where whether or not your, let's say your average sale on your website is $20. So maybe you're selling products, smaller items. Therefore, your ad spend can be a lot smaller, right? So if you spent $100 and you made 10 sales of $200 in revenue, that means you made $100 in profit. Your return on ad spend, the ROAS is return on ad spend, was 200% or 2 times ROAS. Alternatively, right, if your average sale is $600, so you're selling maybe a larger items or maybe a service at $600, you might spend $600 in advertising and make 2 sales. You're having the same or getting the same return on ad spend. So my point is that your budget is really determined by what you're selling. How much does that cost? How much are you willing to put in? How much do you have to put into it? But ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to keep an eye on that return on ad spend to see, is it actually performing? Should I be putting more money in, less money in? And it, you really have to kind of play with it to find a comfortable budget for your business. And again, it's going to really depend on a lot of things. So the product or service that you're selling and the cost of that, it's also going to depend on the size of your audience. So again, I use that example of advertising to all of Canada, or are you advertising to just Grey County, Simcoe County, 30 kilometers around Collingwood, whatever that is, it's going to determine how much you probably should be spending, as well as the length of your campaign. How long is it going to run? Industry and competition, that's also a factor. Unfortunately, if you are selling Apple computers, there's going to be a lot of competition, other people trying to sell these products because they know they are sought after, they sell well. And so therefore, you're going to have a really competitive market there, which might require more of an ad spend, because it's a bidding process, right? You're bidding against other advertisers in that space to get yours to the top. So that's where it, especially on the Google side of things, that's where the competition factor will increase your budget. And then you can also check out this really comprehensive calculator from HubSpot that will help you determine your ad spend. it's, like I said, pretty comprehensive. It looks at both not only your budget that you want to put in, but then also even like what is an expected click-through rate. So it gets a little more advanced in that sense, because you have to sort of know what a reasonable click-through rate is. Is it, 3% or 5%? But at least, even if you're inexperienced, I think it can be a good planning tool in understanding, like, where is your threshold? What is your expectation when you create your campaign, and benchmark for what you actually need to hit for this to be profitable. So again, we're going to be sending out this presentation after, so you'll have those links to check out. Okay, now let's talk about best practices. So I mentioned this earlier too, and this is just Google Ads. We'll cover both platforms specifically, but creating multiple ads within each ad group, again, just really arms the platform with lots of different options, things to try, different creative that will ultimately help you whittle down to what's working, what's more effective, so that you can clear out what's not working. And just, it's a really easy way to optimize your advertising and figure out what is, going to perform better. When it comes to Google Ads, they have a recommendation section. So it's like right up at the top of the menu in your campaigns, where they score your ads. So they give you a score out of 100. And if your ad score is, you'll start to see it drop as your ads have maybe been running for a while. You'll see that score drop off. And then if you visit this recommendation section, though, they just give you information of how you can improve your ad score. And it's invaluable. It's really fantastic. Some of the things, all you have to do is click accept. It'll make the changes for you. And there you go. You've just improved your ad score by a couple of points, and it's going to be better. So we recommend, checking into that section often and keeping an eye on your ad score. It's not that difficult or technical. When it comes to Google, yes.
Sorry. There's a question from Gerard that asks, does it matter in Google Ads whether I say 400 kilometers around Toronto or set up the location by postal code?
Right. Yeah. So I don't think it matters. I mean, 400 kilometers around Toronto versus postal code. Obviously, postal code is going to be a lot more specific, right? It's more like very accurately targeted. And I mean, if you're looking at 400 kilometers around Toronto, that's a lot of postal codes. So probably you're better off to select just a radius around an area. One thing I will point out that we've even been caught up on is the difference between the way these radiuses are set up, or the geographical targeting is set up. There's a couple of options that are really important. So they'll ask you, is it people who are in this location? So like physically they're in that location, or visiting this location. So they even know, like, if this person is from, they're not usually in that radius, but today they are, just for some reason, maybe they're traveling, whatever. Or have an interest in this location. That one is tricky because what we found is that when you target people who have an interest in this location, that really opens the door to like almost anybody. Like we've had campaigns where, we're targeting people around Collingwood, but have an interest in this location selected. And all of a sudden you get traffic from other countries that are just like not relevant. And so I like to really avoid that option for all campaigns. So it's either they are in this location or traveling through it. And really, I mean, the traveling through can be a really great option, especially for anyone in the tourism industry or, tourism business. That can be a great option. But yes, so I'd say stick with the kilometer radius. And then, so taking advantage of extensions. So when Google, especially so with the search ads, we all know what those look like, but they've really given you a lot of tools now to expand those, make them look a lot less like a search ad. So these are called extensions. You can add image extensions, phone number. That's what I was talking about before about a click to call. Really, really fantastic. If that's applicable to your business, of course, but you can add site links. So like links out to other parts of your website that people might be interested in specifically. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of these different extensions that are available, and I highly recommend taking advantage of as many of them as you can. And that's also going to improve your ad score, you will see. And then, yeah, like I've been saying, explore different formats. So things like video, display. We've just been exploring a relatively new type of format called Performance Max. It's kind of a mashup of different things. There's some display elements to it. It'll show on YouTube, and we found it can be pretty effective. So, but again, we only know because we're doing conversion tracking, and we can see, yes, it's driving conversions over, other formats like display, and therefore it's worth investing in. And then, yeah, I keep mentioning conversions, but you want to add as many that are applicable, because again, it might not just be an e-commerce sale, might be phone numbers, phone calls, for example, form submissions, anything that's applicable. Make sure you're tracking it within your campaign. And then over to Meta Ads Manager. Similarly, again, this is, I think, the only one that is the exact same, but create multiple ads within each ad set. I can't stress that enough. Because again, it doesn't cost you any more money. You're just giving the platform more to work with, and it's fantastic. And so when setting up ads in Meta Ads Manager, one of the really cool things to explore, fun things, maybe that's debatable, is the ability to create videos within the platform itself. So essentially, that you access this template system where it will create almost like a slideshow. It'll give movement to different pictures. You can add your logos. You can add a little bit of text. It's actually a really, really cool tool that they have, that what I found in my experience has really increased the engagement on the ads when there's just that little bit of movement, slideshow of a couple of images instead of just a static image. It can really make your ads more engaging and more effective. So worth playing around with for sure. This one, so yeah, I definitely recommend using manual placements. What I mean by that is when it comes to Meta, and so placements are where your ads are shown, right? So, I talked about like more broadly, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, but if we narrow in on that, we have a whole host of options as to where we can show our ads. So places where you probably want your ads shown are places like Reels and Stories and, Feed, right? That's where typically we assume most people are. and exploring. But then there's a whole bunch of other options that we can either turn on or off. So one example is what's the I'm drawing a blank. Facebook has their buy sell trade area. What's that called? Why am I drawing a blank?
Marketplace.
Marketplace. Thank you. Facebook has Marketplace. So you know, for a lot of people, Marketplace I don't think is a very lucrative place to be advertising, because usually people looking for bargains, looking for deals. And so I mean, if you're trying to sell like a premium brand, might not be the best place for that. But so by using manual placements, and this is a setting within your ad set on Meta, you can tell it exactly where you want it to be, where you want your ads to show up, whether or not they're in Marketplace or not. And I think it's a much better approach. And one of the reasons for that is because these are a lot of the placements are in different sizes and shapes and things. So by doing manual placements, you can design your ads exactly for the placements that you are using, right? So if you're using stories and reels, you want it to be in that vertical format, and so on. And then lastly, videos should not require sound. That's pretty straightforward. You know, make sure you have, if there is any like people speaking in it, you want to have that captioned so that people can still get the message without having to have their audio turned up. And that is it. We crammed it in like 10:59. Does anyone have any questions? I know I was hoping to leave a bit more time, but I will give you a second to drop a question in there. I don't have anywhere to be, so I can stick around certainly and answer any questions that you might have. But I will understand if you have to take off. Again, this document will be going out to everyone. We've got a couple more resources here, a couple of articles and different tools for building more effective campaigns. And lastly, of course, again, can't stress enough, the Digital Service Squad is here to help. So book that consult with us. We'd love to connect and talk about digital advertising and helping you make your ads more effective as well. Cool. Well, if there are no questions, trying to stall. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we, really appreciate you coming out today. Hopefully you found this helpful, and we will look forward to seeing you online, seeing you at the next webinar. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye, everybody.